LAPD identified the body in David's car as 15-year-old Celeste Rivas, who was reportedly missing from Riverside County in April of 2024 when she was just 13 years old.
The bigger they are, the harder they fall. And in David's case, that fall has been nothing short of catastrophic. Just a few weeks ago, he was one of the hottest names in music. His tracks weren't just dominating TikTok, they were landing in massive shows like Invincible and the Emmy-winning Arcane. He was teasing collabs with blockbuster games and even had whispers of involvement in one of the most anticipated movies of all time. He looked untouchable. But now, he's been dropped by brands, forced to cancel his tour, and finds himself at the center of a controversy so dark that it's flipped the internet against him overnight. And it all traces back to a shocking discovery connected to his own car. David's story is just getting started, and I'll be posting updates as the case unfolds. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss a single video. Before we get into the scandal, let's rewind a little, because David didn't start as a superstar. In fact, his path into music was an accident, a twist of fate, born out of frustration. At just 13, he was a kid in love with video games, dreaming of being the next big streamer. He poured hours into Call of Duty and Fortnite, grinding out montages and highlight reels to post online. But there was a problem. Every time he uploaded, the videos got flagged. Why? Because the songs he used weren't his, and without monetization, his dream of making it big as a creator seemed impossible. One night, overwhelmed and venting to his mom, she dropped a piece of advice that would change his life forever. Why don't you just make your own music? At first, it sounded ridiculous. David had never recorded a song in his life. Sure, he had sung in a church choir when he was younger, but he didn't think of himself as a musician. Still, he figured he had nothing to lose. If making his own beats meant his videos could finally make money, why not try? So he opened up a basic setup, messed around with sounds, and something clicked. Those first rough tracks weren't masterpieces, but they worked, and more importantly, they were his. For the first time, David wasn't just another gamer on YouTube. He was creating something original. And little did he know, that small decision would be the start of a meteoric rise that would take him from basement recordings to sold-out tours in just a few short years. Once David realized he could make his own tracks, everything changed. What started as a workaround for copyright issues quickly turned into something much bigger. His songs didn't just fill space in his Fortnite montages, they started catching fire on their own. By 2021, clips of his music were spreading across TikTok like wildfire. His beats were short, catchy, and perfect for edits. Before long, creators were using his sounds in their own videos, which gave him exposure far beyond the small following he had as a gamer. And the crazy part? He wasn't even trying to be a pop star. He was just making tracks so his gaming content wouldn't get muted. But the internet had other plans. Fans loved his energy because it felt raw and unpolished. He wasn't backed by a massive label or marketing team, he was just a teenager throwing out tracks from his bedroom. That authenticity struck a chord. And soon, he wasn't just a TikTok musician. He was opening for major artists, including SZA, only a year or two into his career. Think about that for a second. Most artists grind for a decade just to get noticed. David barely had time to figure out who he was as a musician before he was performing in front of thousands. It felt like everything he touched was turning to gold, and that rise only accelerated as brands started knocking. His tracks found their way into shows like Invincible and Arcane, and fans began speculating about collabs with huge gaming franchises. At just 20 years old, David had achieved what most musicians only dream about, and he looked unstoppable. But here's the thing about success that comes too fast. It often hides cracks beneath the surface. And in David's case, those cracks were about to shatter in the most shocking way possible. On September 8th, 2025, everything changed. David was in the middle of his tour, bouncing between cities in the Midwest, fans were lining up outside venues, tickets were sold out, and the shows were electric. But while he was on stage, something far darker was unfolding hundreds of miles away. That morning, reports came in that a Tesla had been towed and impounded. Nothing unusual about that, until workers at the lot noticed a foul odor coming from the car. At first, they assumed it was food, or maybe an animal. But when the smell grew stronger, they called the police. What they found inside the vehicle sent shockwaves through the entire internet. In the trunk was a decomposing body, and when the plates were run, the Tesla came back to one name: David's. Immediately, speculation went wild. How could a rising music star be tied to something so horrific? Fans rushed to defend him, pointing out that he was on tour at the time. Some even pulled up his schedule, showing he was in Madison, Wisconsin on the 7th and Minneapolis, Minnesota on the 9th. How could he possibly have done this if he wasn't even home? That became the central narrative online. David is innocent. Streamers, YouTubers, even casual fans all said the same thing. He was literally performing the next day. If he was guilty, the police would have arrested him immediately. And for a moment, it seemed like maybe this was just some insane mix-up. Maybe someone stole his Tesla. Maybe the police had the wrong guy. After all, Teslas have advanced security systems, built-in trackers, even Sentry mode. Who could pull off stealing one without getting caught? But the relief didn't last long. Because as more details trickled out, the story took a disturbing turn. The body inside the Tesla wasn't a stranger. It wasn't random. And once the identity was revealed, defending David became a lot harder. A day after the discovery, the mystery of the body in David's Tesla was solved, and the truth only fueled the fire. The victim was identified as one 15-year-old Celeste Rivas, a girl who had been reported missing from Riverside County back in April of 2024. When she vanished, she was only 13. For over a year, her family had no answers. Now, their worst fears had been confirmed. The condition of the remains made things even more disturbing. Reports described the body as severely decomposed, with the coroner noting it had likely been there for an extended period of time. Identification came through a tattoo on her right index finger that read, "Shit." A woman who believed she was Celeste's mother reached out to authorities, pointing out the connection. Soon after, the LAPD confirmed what many feared: the body was Celeste's. This was the turning point. Overnight, social media flooded with photos, videos, and screenshots tying David to Celeste. Old pictures surfaced, showing them together. Fans began sharing lyrics from David's songs that seemed to reference her directly. One track from 2023 even mentioned a girl named Celeste by name, with lyrics that were now being dissected under a microscope. And it didn't stop there. Alleged Discord messages leaked, showing conversations where David not only mentioned Celeste, but was accused of surrounding himself with underage fans. One screenshot even showed someone in the server referring to Celeste by her full name, with David still active in the chat. Others claimed he paid people to keep her age a secret. The question shifted from, is he innocent, to how much did he actually know? Suddenly, all those early defenses, the tour schedule, the claims he couldn't have been involved, started to crumble. Because even if David wasn't physically responsible for what happened, the growing mountain of evidence suggested he was far closer to Celeste than anyone had realized. And once the internet connected those dots, the backlash was immediate. At first, David's fanbase fought tooth and nail to protect him. They pointed to his alibis, his sold-out shows, his charm. But once Celeste's identity was confirmed, the tone online flipped almost overnight. TikTok lit up with breakdown videos. Creators stitched together old interviews, music videos, and Discord screenshots, building massive threads that painted David as someone who had been hiding in plain sight. One viral post with over 5 million views simply showed side-by-side images of David and Celeste, captioned with 4 words: "He knew her well." Streamers who had defended him days earlier started backtracking. YouTube commentators who once praised his meteoric rise were now uploading exposés with titles like "The Dark Side of David's Music." Even some of his closest supporters quietly deleted old videos featuring his songs. The speed of the shift was staggering. One moment, he was the underground darling with a cult-like fanbase. The next, he was a symbol of betrayal. Fans posted heartbroken comments like, "I defended you to my friends, now I feel sick." And this wasn't just digital outrage. Venues began canceling his upcoming tour dates, collaborations he had teased weeks earlier vanished into thin air. Even playlists on Spotify and Apple quietly removed his biggest tracks. But perhaps the most brutal blow came from his own community. On Discord, the same platform that helped grow his career, users began sharing stories of uncomfortable encounters, private chats, and alleged manipulation. Whether every detail was true or not didn't matter anymore. The internet had already made up its mind. David was guilty in the court of public opinion. It was a full collapse of a reputation, and it all happened in the span of days. And just when people thought the story couldn't get any darker, the focus shifted back to David himself, because while the internet raged, no one seemed to know where he actually was. After the backlash reached its peak, something strange happened. David simply vanished. No tweets, no Instagram stories, no late-night live streams where he usually vented to fans. Even his closest friends said they hadn't heard from him. To the outside world, it was as if he disappeared into thin air. At first, people assumed it was a PR strategy. Maybe his team had told him to stay quiet until the storm passed. But the silence dragged on. Days turned into weeks. Concert organizers announced he'd pulled out for personal reasons. Rumors started piling up. Some fans claimed they spotted him at an airport in Berlin, hood up, carrying nothing but a backpack. Others swore he was hiding out in his hometown, crashing on a childhood friend's couch. A grainy photo even surfaced of someone who looked just like David buying groceries late at night, but the image was too blurry to confirm. The speculation fed into the mystery. Was he on the run? Was he negotiating legal trouble behind the scenes? Or had the pressure simply broken it? On Discord and Reddit, theories got wilder by the day. Some believed he was working on a secret album, using the chaos as part of an elaborate marketing scheme. Others feared something darker, that he couldn't handle the fallout and had retreated somewhere no one could reach him. But there was one common thread across all these rumors. Nobody really knew the truth, and the silence only made the story bigger. Because in the world of music, disappearing isn't neutral. It's either the prelude to a legendary comeback or the final act of a tragedy. Months passed, and David's silence grew heavier. No confirmed sightings, no official statements, just an empty space where one of music's fastest rising stars used to be. And in that void, the theories only multiplied. Some fans clung to hope, insisting he was working on a secret project. They pointed to cryptic playlists appearing on his old Spotify account, convinced it was his way of saying, "I'm still here." Others were far less optimistic, speculating that his disappearance was permanent, that the weight of the scandal had pushed him beyond repair. Journalists compared his vanishing act to other artists who had disappeared in the middle of controversy, only to re-emerge years later, scarred but still standing. But David's case felt different. His rise had been meteoric, almost unreal. His fall, just as sudden and devastating. Even now, people argue about him online. Was he a misunderstood prodigy who couldn't handle fame? Or a manipulator who built his empire on lies? The truth is messy, and maybe we'll never know. But one thing is certain, his story became a cautionary tale in the digital age. How quickly fame can build, how brutally it can collapse, and how impossible it is to disappear when the internet decides to chase you. And whether he returns or remains a ghost, David has already etched himself into music lore, not for the records he broke, not for the songs he wrote, but for the haunting mystery of how it all ended.